What's going on, everybody? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, coming to you after the Eagles dominate in prime time at SoFi Stadium, beating the Rams to improve to 9-2, winning 37-20. It was an incredible game, a game that you felt confident in going in, and you left feeling even more confident. We'll get into it all. There's a lot of great storylines and a lot of positives to talk about tonight. Before we do, as always, we're live on YouTube this way. We're live on TikTok this way. We will answer all of the questions about the game and comments about the game as they come in. And I'm assuming tonight we'll have quite a few of them after a huge historical record-breaking game like we just witnessed from Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. I want to go back to a point in the second quarter where you could kind of tell how this game was going to go. Chris Collinsworth brought up the blocking scheme of both teams and how early on the Rams were able to kind of, keep with the Eagles, block well, run the football effectively, something that the Eagles always try to do, and it is quite obvious that this is the game plan. There have been times this year where solid, good teams have been able to stay in games for about a quarter when playing the Eagles. And then the wheels come off, and you ask why. Well, it's because of how dominant the Eagles are up front on both the offense and defensive lines, and they were again tonight. And when an offensive line as good as the Eagles is leaning on you, you get run over by the roller coaster that is Saquon Barkley. And just once again to the Giants, thank you so much for Saquon Barkley. 255 yards. It was a record for the Eagles in franchise history. It's the most in an NFL game since Jamal Charles in 2009, 15 years ago. He popped 2 home run touchdown runs in the second half, including the first play of the third quarter, a 70-yard touchdown run. He had over 300 yards total, and the offense put up 37 points. We touched on this a week ago. The Eagles are like a UFC fight, and it's a title fight that goes 5 rounds instead of 3. When you can't knock out your opponent in that first round, and that carries that 5 rounds, and they can get you to the mat and rustle you and give you body blows for 5 rounds, you just aren't keeping up, and teams aren't able to keep up with them right now. And you saw that tonight. In terms of blocking scheme, the Rams are a well-run, well-efficient team. They had no answers beyond the first quarter in those first 2 drives. They could not run the ball effectively. On the flip side, the Eagles continued to run the ball even more effectively as the game went. That is the difference between the Eagles and a lot of teams in the NFL. It was on its utmost display tonight, and I can't shout it out enough because when we talk about them playing some of the better teams and they're going to in a week against a really good offense against the Ravens and a really good running back like Derrick Henry, that is a difference maker that puts the Eagles in contention with the teams of the Lions, the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs. That is what puts the Eagles in there. Their ability to lean on you with their offensive line and open that up to big-time players who can hit home runs and change the game in the course of a few plays like Saquon Barkley can do. And yes, I think we need to open up the MVP conversation for him at this point. And it's kind of funny because when we did our preview show, we said this could be a game that decides Rookie of the Year. If Quinyon Mitchell performs well again in primetime back-to-back weeks, we could really be talking about him as the Rookie of the Year since he was playing Jared Verse. Well, we came out of that game saying, I think that just decided MVP. Like, we're at the point that might have helped decide MVP, and it definitely put Saquon Barkley's name in there. Again, it's a quarterback award, so it's really tough as it is. People have brought up the fact that the tush-push takes touchdowns away from him. I think it's more so the fact that Saquon Barkley is a running back, and it is a quarterback-driven award that will likely go to a Lamar Jackson, to a Josh Allen. Not to say that they are undeserving because they're both supremely talented, but you were seeing live in real time the difference maker that Saquon Barkley has been for the Eagles. And it is exactly what we thought. They brought up the stat on the broadcast tonight. He was getting hit after 1.4 yards when he was with the Giants. He's getting hit after 2.6 yards when he's with the Eagles. If you're allowing someone of that caliber to constantly get to the next level, and it's nearly 3 yards before you touch him, it is almost impossible to stop him because he can run over you, through you, and sometimes jump backwards over you as well. It is nonstop, and it is truly truly special to watch. Again, there's a few guys on this Eagles team this year, including him, who is going to be in the MVP conversation. It'll be the lead story tomorrow when you wake up and watch the talk shows. But there are multiple people on this team, including him, that have exceeded even the highest of expectations that we had for him going in. He's been fantastic. And again, I just want to shout out the scheme and the style, because they maul people on that offensive line. Mass-wise, there's 3 guys over 320 pounds, and you can see how they scheme some of these runs. I thought this was a masterclass, at least in the first half for both teams, over 4 quarters for the Eagles especially, on how to scheme blocks to get your guys to be able to run into gaps. The Rams were able to do it for a quarter. The Eagles were able to do it for 4. That's the big difference between the Eagles and a lot of different teams right now. They are fantastic. We'll take a few comments here, and then we'll get into some other things that we saw in the game. It'll be a Saquon love show, a love fest, but there are a lot of, helmet stickers to go around for the guys. So we got the Fly Eagles Fly, 300 yards. It was just an incredible game, so I appreciate the comments there. A few Fly Eagles Flies here as well. I'm a Niners fan, but what's up? What the hell are you talking about? Yeah, well, you're at the wrong place, because we're not going to talk about the Niners and everything that goes wrong with them and where they're at this season. We've been there as Eagles fans. If you're a Niners fan right now, you're feeling it. You got to be able to make the most of the moment when you're in the Super Bowl, because you're seeing what happens now. So glad I traded for Saquon at the beginning of the season in fantasy. Go Birds. 51 fantasy points saved me this week. A lot of happy fantasy owners for Saquon in the chat, and I believe it. The trade for Saquon at the beginning of the season is amazing, and anybody who invested him early in the season, to be able to see this pay off, it's incredible. And you can see that tonight. 51 fantasy points is just, if you're his opponent, it's just really hard to to do anything about that. You just gotta sit and take that out, like the Rams did tonight. I want to go back to that second quarter again. I brought it up before and talking about how the Eagles were able to. Collinsworth said that they had been able to bully each other. And I do think that for the first quarter, the Rams were able to bully it in a way, and they were able to run the ball effectively. Like I mentioned, I think they are a good run scheme team. Not only is it talent up front, but they're able to create lanes for Kyron Williams to run. They are able to get teams off balance with play action. They utilize tight ends and wide receivers and blocking really well, maybe better than any other team in the league. So they were able to run the ball effectively in the first quarter, and both teams were, quote unquote, able to bully with their offenses. That stopped in the second quarter. The Eagles defense gave up negative yards in the second quarter. They forced 3 3-and-outs, and they forced 3 sacks. I thought that was the difference, because it eliminated and eradicated any rhythm that the Rams offense had in those first 2 drives. They forced the big fumble to stop on the first drive, immediately get the ball, put points on the board, something the Eagles have struggled with in the past, especially in first quarters throughout this entire season. So they forced the big turnover, but the Rams had still been able to run the ball effectively. That all changed in the second quarter. It completely halted it, and it changed the momentum of this game to give the Eagles a 13-7 lead going into the half, and then immediate touchdown to start the second half to go up double digits. And it was really hard for the Rams to get back in a rhythm from there. It felt like that the entire time, where it was eliminated in that rhythm, in that blocking scheme, and in that bullying that Chris Collinsworth was talking about. Now, why were they able to do that? The depth on this defensive line is showing through since the bye week, and it is remarkably impressive, because Jalen Carter was highlighted tonight. He was highlighted during the Thursday night football game, and he should be highlighted pretty much every week. And you could see it this week that he was highlighted in the film room, because he was double teamed on almost 80% of his snaps. But what's the difference with the Eagles so far since the bye week on this 7-game winning streak is the guys around him and how they've been able to pursue the quarterback and shut down the run. You're getting contributions from a lot of different guys that allows teams to double Jalen Carter and then open them up to one-on-ones. And if they win, it completes a totally different dynamic for this team. The guy tonight that stuck out the most, obviously, was Milton Williams, who had, 3 sacks tonight? And you saw it a few different times where Jalen Carter is winning even in a double team, but it's forcing the quarterback to step up in the pocket, and he steps up right into Milton Williams, who's winning on his one-on-ones. But we don't even have to stop there because they got contributions from Moro Ojomo. They got contributions from Brandon Graham, who hopefully is healthy because it is insane how well he is playing at his age. And you even got contributions. Maybe he didn't get shouted out tonight, but Nolan Smith had 4 sacks in his last 5 games going into this. They're getting constant contributions. And when it's coming at you in waves with that defensive line, it becomes really, really tough to run the ball effectively, and it creates a lot of pressure on your quarterback. Again, going back to that second quarter, the Eagles were able to stick with their game plan, run the ball effectively, dominate with their offensive line. On the flip side, they're sending waves at the Rams' offensive line, and especially those tackles who look severely overwhelmed for 3 straight quarters that put pressure on Matthew Stafford. And the broadcast even highlighted it. They were able to expose something in the Eagles secondary, but they couldn't always take advantage of it. Darius Slay, even before his injury, was, he's a good coverage guy, but he's never been solid in run defense. He's never been solid in open field tackling. So they were scheming open one-on-ones to get larger receivers and tight ends, whether it be a tight end or Puka Nacua, who is a larger receiver, onto Slay and making him tackle in the open field. He goes out with the injury because they're doing that, and they bring in Isaiah Rodgers, who struggled. The one PI wasn't his fault, but aside from that, it was a clear and obvious targeting of Isaiah Rodgers at that CB2 position opposite of Quinyon Mitchell, but they couldn't always take advantage of it because of the pressure in Matthew Stafford's face and because they couldn't run the ball effectively. You didn't even hear Kyren Williams' name a lot in that second half or beyond the first quarter especially, and they forced another fumble on his longest run of 9 yards in that second half. It was a total, utter domination from that defensive line, and I think the offensive line and defensive line dominate in 2 different ways. Schematically and physical size is what allows the offensive line to dominate so much. The defensive line is the amount of people who are able to win one-on-one matchups against offensive line and offensive tackles to create negative plays that force offenses behind the sticks. And I think that combination in the interior, in the infrastructure of your team, allows you to be a contender who can win games in January and hopefully February. We've seen, even in Philadelphia over the years, teams that are great at skill positions. They are flashy. Going back to even the Chip Kelly years, which were grueling, bad years. But what was wrong with those teams? They were too lean. They wanted to run the ball quickly. They wanted to run the ball and go fast. Well, because they wanted to go fast, they stayed lean. This is the quite opposite. They want to bully people, be larger than their opponent, and send more guys on defense at them. They were doing a lot of things, too, that we've seen in recent weeks where they do like a 5-person front, use one of those linebackers who's done so well in tackling an open field, and you saw it there in that first half. Here's a great example of front 7 depth. They stay in assignment. They open up a gap. Nakobe Dean hits the gap. He hits Kyren Williams. It's 2nd and 10. Again, they commit to the run, the Rams do. Moro Ojomo beats his man one-on-one, tackle. It's now 3rd and 10. On 3rd and 10, Brandon Graham beats the tackle and gets the sack. So that's 3 different guys who stayed in assignment, in gap play, one-on-one matchups against their offensive linemen and made it either a tackle or a sack to force the defense off the field. But it was that like 10 straight times at one point during this game. And really, if we want to be honest about it, I thought there were some questionable officiating calls, probably both ways, to be honest, but especially on that PI call that set the Rams up at the 2-yard line, which allowed them to score their 2nd touchdown. If not for that, it looked like the Eagles were going to pitch a shutout, aside from the garbage time Cooper Kupp touchdown, for 3 quarters straight. The Rams could get nothing going. And even on the drive when the Rams scored in the 3rd quarter, if you look at it, it was a tackle for loss by Brandon Graham, and near strip sack from Brandon Graham, and good coverage on 3rd and 16, but it was obliterated by a bad penalty call to set them up with the 2. So I can't even be frustrated with the Eagles on the one time where they did give up points. They were phenomenal tonight on that defensive line and in the trenches as a whole. It continues to be a trend as we move forward over across the 7 weeks. They are winning in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and they're doing it in a variety of ways, and it should be shouted out, and especially shouted out for Brandon Graham, because just based on some of the tweets that we've seen where he's getting hugged by guys before he walked into the locker room with the injury, most times when guys are totally fine and going to bounce back, their teammates aren't hugging them. You know, like if guys walk off the field, a perfect example, Darius Slay had a concussion. He just walked to the locker room. You don't get a lot of hugs unless somebody thinks it's serious. Hopefully Brandon Graham is okay, because his ability to play at this rate and give you these quality of snaps at his age is quite astounding. And I hope this isn't a long-term injury, who's a guy who is still a phenomenal contributor for that defense and somebody who's much needed, because they just put Bryce Huff on injured reserve this week. So they'd be down 2 defensive ends going into a matchup against the most multi-talented quarterback in the league in Lamar Jackson. So we got facts in the YouTube chat. All right, let's take a look at some of the comments here. A lot of Saquon stuff. The Rams are so predictable. I do think the Rams are predictable. I almost think it's part of their scheme. I did think they got a little too predictable at times, but at the same time, I think it's almost purposely predictable where they run and pass, but it's just a matter of they trust their scheme. Well, tonight the Eagles just blew that scheme up. I'm more surprised at the defense success. Go Birds. I really appreciate that, Johnny. I am as well, just because we had an idea, but we didn't fully know, and we knew this was going to be the toughest test that Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell have faced going up against Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. They passed with flying covers, even though Puka Nacua had over 100 yards receiving, but a lot of that was them targeting Isaiah Rodgers. So the defense having 4 or 5 sacks, getting stops at key moments, stopping the run for 3 straight quarters, an entire quarter where the Rams had negative yards and the Eagles scored twice. That was really, again, those body blows. They're constantly on the field. It's back-to-back weeks where they take over the second half, and you look at it, the defense gets themselves off the field, and then the Eagles are on the field with their offense. They're winning the time of possession. They won the turnover battle. They won the snap count battle. At some point, the math just tips too much in the favor of the Eagles, where a defense can't withstand for that long. And it's like watching a dam break against these opposing defenses who are stuck on an island on that field, because the Eagles defense is forcing offenses off quickly. And then Eagles drives are lasting 10, 11, 12 plays. You saw it in third down conversion rate. The Eagles were really successful on third downs. They were in a lot of third and manageables. The Rams did not have a third down conversion until the fourth quarter, and a lot of that was because they were not in third and manageable situations. Saquon is Superman. He, again, is just absolutely incredible. Do you think Barkley could be MVP? I absolutely do at this point. It does help when you have those quote-unquote Heisman moments if you guys are college football fans. Sometimes it's not just the stats that back it up. There has to be an agenda pushing it as well. Well, if you set a rushing record for your team and score 3 touchdowns and have over 300 yards in a primetime game at SoFi to put your team to 9-2, that is a marquee moment. When it's a primetime game like that, instead of playing at 1 o'clock against like Cleveland, it's a big difference. So a lot of people, a lot of eyeballs on it now, and I think a lot of people are going to be pushing that agenda. I do think some people think the award has gotten stale. I don't necessarily think that's fair to Lamar, that we simply just don't give him the award just because he has won it before and you want to give it to somebody else. We ran into that problem in the NBA where we just stopped giving the award to LeBron James, even though he was clearly the most valuable player in the league. So I don't necessarily think that's fair, but at the same time, I do think the stats back up Saquon and his campaign push for MVP, and it's really hard to argue with 300 total yards and 3 touchdowns from a running back in this day and age. I'm sad Quinyon let up a garbage time touchdown. Listen, I will say this about Quinyon, and I hope it doesn't impact him in his campaign for Defensive Rookie of the Year. He, again, you don't even get to talk about him that much during the game because they just refuse to even throw near him. And yeah, I do. It sucks that he gave up the garbage time touchdown, but I don't think that will be impacted against him. He was phenomenal again tonight. And it is pretty crazy that they are in a situation where they're targeting a 10-year veteran in the league. And then they're targeting his backup before they're targeting a rookie who's played less than 3 months. There are 3 guys at the corner position in that game: Quinyon, Cooper, and then Slay, who was checked out for Isaiah Rodgers. Cooper and Quinyon are the guys they're targeting the least. They're avoiding 2 rookies in the defense and opting for the veterans instead on who to target. Now, could be a weakness for the Eagles going forward. Some teams might have caught that on tape, and they'll continue to do that, especially next week if Slay can't play. But it is pretty crazy, albeit even if Quinyon did give up the touchdown tonight, and I think that might be the first one he gave up all season, a garbage time touchdown should not be held against him. And we should really consider how crazy it is that teams already are leaving him on an island and don't want anything to do with it. Don't even throw it in his direction. And sometimes with those garbage time touchdowns, you're just keeping things in front of you, and that allows some passing yards to be gained on you because you're just not allowed to give up that home run behind you. And I think that's what really was happening to Quinyon on that. Not Quinyon best game, but we still dominate. I still think he was really good. Again, they were really targeting Isaiah Rodgers. They were targeting Slay before that. They were running to Slay's side. They were doubling Jalen Carter, as they pointed out, and then making someone behind Carter come up and make that tackle. They wanted to push that ball over to Slay's side. So even if it's not Quinyon's best game, the fact that they just kind of avoid him in general, I think is really, really cool to see that already. Shout out to Jalen Carter. I totally agree with that. Slay is garbage. Listen, Slay is who he is at this point. He's not my favorite, to be totally honest with you. But you saw the difference between Slay and Isaiah Rodgers. So, again, that might be concerning for the Eagles going forward, is the cornerback opposite of Quinyon can be targeted. You realize, like, some of the better teams are going to be able to exploit that. You'll probably see a repeat of that, or at least try to, next week with the Ravens, and maybe even that double team of Jalen Carter. I was winning by 30 plus, and I was playing against Saquon Barkley and Cooper Kupp. I have Puka Nacua. That is an all-time bad beat in fantasy football. Anybody who played against Saquon, you just got obliterated. But then the garbage time touchdown by Cooper Kupp is just kind of salt in the wound for the fantasy people. That is really, really tough. I have to confirm this since we're live. We didn't get a chance to take a look at it, but there are some comments that Brandon Graham could be out for the year. I didn't get to see the tweets. I looked right before we went live just to see if there was anything. It did not seem good. Just because, like I said, people were giving him hugs and stuff on the sideline. You usually don't do that with a guy who might be listed as questionable the following week. I genuinely hope that he is not out for the year, because that would be really, really tough on this team and just really, really tough for morale as well. I had Pacheco, Higgins, and Bijan out this week. That is really tough for fantasy football. Let's see if we got Fly Eagles Fly. And I was up by 8 and lost on that Cooper Kupp last-minute touchdown. That is just brutal. And a lot of Go Birds in the chat. And Isaac, I really appreciate that as well. I'd rather have Isaiah to develop rather than have Slay in there. That is actually a great comment. Let's take it one step forward. Why don't we just play Kaylee Ringo? I think it got to the point where let's just let Kaylee – if they're going to just keep targeting Isaiah Rodgers and it was going as poorly as it was, why don't we just let Kaylee Ringo play? I think – he at times also gets himself in trouble in coverage because he uses his hands and can commit penalties and be undisciplined and stuff like that. But at the same time, I like the way he hits. I think he's aggressive. I love the way he's been playing on special teams this year. I think that is a big culture thing with the Eagles that kind of goes unnoticed because they have so many talented guys like an A.J. Brown, like a Saquon Barkley. So I think at that point, I do agree with that point. Instead of letting Slay be in there, if you want a guy to develop, I think Kaylee Ringo is the guy that you want to develop. And we'll see concussions like that. I'm assuming Darius Slay will probably be out the following week as well. Fly Eagles Fly, let's go. And that is just incredible, incredible stuff from this tonight. 255 on the ground. Saquon is unreal. Oof, man, he is 300 yards total too. It was just absolutely incredible from him tonight. A few other things. Saquon's going to get a lot of the headlines. He really should. A.J. Brown and the difference that he makes in this offense, they have yet to lose a game this season when he plays. He is a yards after the catch machine. He is this safety net for Jalen Hurts on third down. Tonight, they again struggle when one of the two is out because wide receiver threes just haven't developed, whether it's Jahan Dotson, Johnny Wilson. They even saw Britton Covey get back into the lineup tonight, but there's really no third dependable guy. But having A.J. Brown back out there is just like, it feels like if you're in the ocean floating looking for something, he is the safety raft at all times. And he was so again tonight, even in a game where the Rams knew that the Eagles are going to try to scheme him open, get him the ball without Devontae Smith out there, and they really still couldn't stop it. He had over 100 yards receiving. He had the touchdown. Which looked clear live, by the way. I know they went to the review on a few of these. I thought these were just pretty clear. He looked like he got feet down. It looked like a touchdown live. And it was a great catch by him in the back of the end zone and good red zone efficiency, something that I think Jalen Hurts and the Eagles have struggled with this year, that they were a lot more crisp with this game with the Kenny Gainwell touchdown and the A.J. Brown touchdown. So, again, when A.J. Brown is out there, what a performance by him. He is just so good. And the yards after the catch thing, he might not be the best receiver in the league. I genuinely believe that he is the best yards after the catch guy. And there were multiple times tonight where they really needed it because, again, without Devontae Smith, it's easy to key in on some of the other guys, and they're less dependable aside from A.J. Brown. So they're not going to really let you take the top off of the defense and take deep shots to A.J. Brown. It's exactly what they're expecting. So for him to turn these gains of 9, 10 and turn them into 32, 18, and just gain an extra 10, 12 yards there just because guys can't tackle him. He's great with the spin move. That goes a long way into creating those larger explosive plays that you might not necessarily be able to create by just simply throwing it deep to him. Instead, him doing the work underneath. And I thought they did a really good job of that. He was a key on third downs, like I mentioned. And then Hurts, again, I thought used his legs effectively and efficiently on third downs in that game, where it wasn't just bailing out of the pocket, which we've had criticism of him before in the past, but more staying in, finding A.J. Brown. And if he did run, it was on key third downs, where there were a few times where the Rams were out of assignment football, out of gaps, and it allowed Jalen Hurts to kind of flush himself out of the pocket and have a lead blocker, and it turned into almost a design run because of how the Rams were blitzing him. And speaking of blitzing him, we're showering the entire offense with praise, and we cannot do so by stopping just at the players. I thought it was a really well-coached, well-executed game plan from the start. You saw how crisp they were on the first drive, even if it resulted in 3 points instead of a touchdown. There was a good run balance pass. There was a key to get it to your two best playmakers in Saquon Barkley, in A.J. Brown. Jalen Hurts ran the ball on a few QB draws, something that we saw a lot of last year, less of this year. They did it a few times and then went away from it, which is fine because I think it's effective to a point. And they did so 3 times in the first half. It was effective. No need to get him killed. And like I said, he was able to step up and run on his own, and he was effective, having over 40 yards rushing himself. So I thought that was good. I thought the best that they did, they knew that the Rams were going to send pressure. Again, without Devontae Smith, they're less likely and less inclined to hit those home runs. So they were bringing pressure. They wanted to because they don't have a dependable wide receiver 3 at this time. They almost have to just try something, or else Saquon Barkley is going to run past them. So they're sending pressure. They're sending in a lot of guys. What did the Eagles do? 2 really good screenplays. And I know Saquon slipped on the one, but that would have been a first down. And then the next one gets them down to the 10-yard line on a crucial third down. They said it on the broadcast that the Rams have almost no choice but to send a blitz and send pressure and send actual extra guys. And what do the Eagles do? A perfect counter with that screenplay that goes 33 yards for Saquon Barkley, sets them up for the Kenny Gainwell touchdown, who has provided pop. They use those like pull runs with him, and he does a great job of kind of getting low behind the offensive lineman on those pulls and shooting himself free for gains of 10 to 12 last week and then for the touchdown this week. So they're finding their rhythm and knowing who does what well. A good example of that is reading that they have to send pressure almost if they have any chance of stopping you, countering it with screens like that, and then knowing how to use guys like a Kenny Gainwell. So it was a really well-coached game. And then like even Sirianni, like I think there's times where his situational awareness is bad. It's been brought up pretty much every week this season. It's been brought up multiple times over his coaching career. You look at that in the second half, it finally worked in his favor. There was a 3rd and 3. There was an incomplete pass. The Rams were called for holding. At first, it goes decline, which would set up a 4th and 3. Instead, he opts for the 3rd and 13, a little bit delayed. I know he probably shouldn't have been granted that, but he opts for the 3rd and 13. It would give them 2 chances, but on that play, Milton Williams gets a sack. The following play, they have to force to kick the field goal. They miss the field goal, and the Eagles get the ball back. So that's coaching situational awareness that even Sirianni was good with tonight. So all in all, I thought coaching execution did a great job of knowing when to counter the opposing team and getting the ball to their best playmakers. It was a really, really good job. A lot of comments about Brandon Graham. I think it's sounding like he is done for the season. So this is going to be tough if it's true, because he said at the beginning of the year, this is his last year. It was remarkable and jaw-dropping tonight to watch him just excel. There were a few times he blew up the tackle, he blew up the tight end, and he did a great, great job. So if it is true and it's seeming that way that his season is over, that is a real tearjerker, because it is without saying that he will go down as a Eagles Hall of Famer. His jersey will be retired. We just don't want to see that retirement ceremony just quite yet. And the way the season is going, where the Commanders lose today, the Eagles win today, they now have about realistically speaking, a 3-game lead in this division. You're starting to look at the playoff schedule and thinking that you could be in this and clinch this division and get him one last chance at a ring. So if it's true his season is over, that is just horrible, horrible news. And I hope that is not the case. And we will definitely check on it after this. And then it does suck if he's out for the season. Justice Hill or Gus Edwards tomorrow. Yeah, we'll talk about some other teams while we're here. I'm big on Gus Edwards tomorrow. I think that they are trying to do at least somewhat of a snap share between him and J.K. Dobbins. Do you think the 49ers make the playoffs? I don't think that the 49ers make the playoffs. They were obliterated today by the Packers, but there's just too much of a logjam there in the NFC West with teams that are healthier than them. The Seahawks have put it together. That Rams team that the Eagles beat tonight, even though they beat them, I still think that's a good team. And the Cardinals might be the best team in the NFC West. So they're kind of in that logjam there where they still have a chance, but that logjam almost works against them, because as they beat up on each other, like you saw with the Seahawks beating the Cardinals today, a lot of the NFC North teams are starting to stack up wins and not slowing down. Vikings win, Packers win, Lions win. It's hard to keep track with that. That's going to go 2 wildcard teams there. And then the Commanders, they lost today, but they're sitting at 8-3. They're looking at another wild card spot as well. So the 49ers' real only chance at this time, I feel like Steve Kornacki looking at the board and seeing who's going to find votes from where and realizing the votes aren't coming in from the counties. And that's how it kind of feels with the 49ers, is they're running out of places and running out of slots, and their schedule's still pretty tough, and they're just not a healthy team right now. So I don't know if they'll be able to finally get over that hump that they've been trying to all season as try to get healthy. Herbert goes off tomorrow. I honestly think he could be, and I think the Chargers are the most unsung, unspoken team of the year. Playing a playoff game at Seattle is going to be low-key dangerous, definitely, for sure. And then a few more BG comments in here. So I think it's safe to say we kind of know what the news is going to be once we get off the stream here. But again, just a few more things here with the Eagles that you want to see consistency. It's been 7 straight weeks. It's been everything we've asked of them since the bye week. They have been really good in phase on defense, with everybody knowing where they need to be, something that was not the case when they went to 2-2 losing it at Tampa Bay. It has been a variety of different guys on that defensive line. With the defensive line having depth and getting production, it creates less pressure on Jalen Carter as he's getting constantly double teamed, and still creating a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. With that amount of defensive tackle help, whether it's Ajomo, whether it's Milton Williams, whether it's Jordan Davis helping Jalen Carter, they are forcing teams into a lot of negative plays and setting them up on 3rd and longs, in which case the linebackers have been great and the ends have been getting to the quarterback. On the offensive side of the ball, you see what this offense can be when A.J. Brown is in it, the plays that he's able to create for himself, the home runs that he's able to hit over the top. They'll get Devontae Smith back. I think he'll probably be back next week. He's been limping a little bit over the past few weeks. It felt like he needed a game off. So you'd probably get him back as well in your free-flowing offense. The equation has not changed. It will not change. It is clear. Like I mentioned at the top, and finish with this because we need to talk about it every week, and it is how you win in this league these days, and it's how you win in playoff games. They are able to maul teams for 4 quarters straight. It leans on teams. We mentioned it last week against the Commanders on a short week on the road, how that could really lean on the Commanders if they're constantly on the field, constantly having to tackle Saquon Barkley, and that big offensive line is pulverizing them for 4 quarters straight and winning the time of possession battle and being out there for 2-to-1 ratio in terms of snap count. Well, fast forward a week and a half on the road against the Rams, the same equation worked. They were able to lean on them, and it just took too much energy out of that Rams defense, and you saw what happened. It looked like they were a boa constrictor, just constricting their prey and suffocating them, and that's how it felt watching the Eagles against that front seven of the Rams, and it was capitalized big time on huge runs from Saquon Barkley across the whole half. They were absolutely gassed having to deal with the Eagles. That does not change as you go into a game against the Ravens and in the near future against the Steelers, who run a very similar type of scheme as you do. So that's something to keep an eye on because the Eagles have been doing it so well. And everybody is in phase on defense and on offense. Everyone knows their role. Everyone is executing well. I thought this was the best executed game of the season for the Eagles. It is now 7 wins in a row, 9-2, tops in the division, tied for the tops in the conference, a game behind the Lions. They are playing excellent football right now and have survived another great test with flying colors, and will be met with another one on the road. And one last key, they brought it up on the broadcast. This is the last time that they even get on a plane this season. They have the majority home games, and their only away games, they're going to be going to Washington and Baltimore. So they don't even make it beyond the DMV for the rest of the season. The rest of those games, they're playing at home. So the schedule is pretty favorable in that sense after the one West Coast trip. That matters at the end of the season and going into the playoffs. So all is doing really well for this team right now. And it has been a fun time watching them and watching Saquon Barkley. So we'll be back this week. I appreciate everybody who commented here, who commented on TikTok. I appreciate everybody who's subscribed to our YouTube in recent weeks, everybody who's followed along to our TikTok lives, especially with fantasy football in recent weeks. Maybe we'll do one tomorrow night to comment on the Eagles' next opponent in the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football against the Chargers, and what will be a great matchup. We'll talk fantasy there as well. But for the night, the Eagles win. The Eagles dominate. The Saquon Barkley MVP candidacy is on, and the Eagles' race to winning the NFC East is running well as well. Again, appreciate it from everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.